Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the WMATA Executive Committee meeting for March 10th, 2022. I want to welcome everyone to today's activities, but before we begin, I'd like to ask our Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Empasado, to please provide us with our safety contact. Ms. Empasado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Metro's elevators and escalators provide access to the transit system's many underground stations and to station platforms. Metro has the most elevators and escalators of any transit system in North America. Navigating these vertical circulation systems is an important part of using the Metro system safely. When using Metro elevators, enter and exit carefully. Watch your step, stand aside for exiting passengers, and be sure to hold children by the hand. Steer clear of the doors, keeping clothing and carry-ons away from the opening. Never try to stop a closing door with your hands, feet, or other items. Wait for the next elevator. If assistance is needed while in an elevator, use the provided phone or intercom system. In the event of a fire, use an escalator or stairs. Do not use the elevator. When using Metro escalators, stand facing forward and hold the handrail. Never sit on the stairs or the handrail. Be sure to hold children by the hand and don't allow children to sit or play on the escalator. If you are traveling with a child in a stroller, with luggage, or other large items, do not use an escalator. Use an elevator instead. When riding on an escalator, be sure to exit promptly from the escalator. Never stop or stand at an escalator landing, as this can cause a dangerous pileup. In the event of an escalator emergency, push the emergency stop buttons at the top or bottom of the escalator. The escalator will stop and an alarm will sound. As you travel the Metro system, report any concerns with elevators or escalators to the station manager. For more information on Metro's vertical circulation elements, visit wmata.com. This includes our safety contact this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Empasado. Since this is our first public meeting of the day, I'd like to ask the Board Corporate Secretary, Ms. Ellison, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Smedberg?
Present.
Vice Chair Babers?
Present.
Vice Chair Ports?
Present.
Director Klein?
Present.
Director Letourneau?
Present.
Director Lowe?
Present.
Director Drummer?
Present.
And Director Martin Proctor.
Good morning. Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections from anyone, hearing none, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from our January 27, 2022 meeting and the executive sessions of January 27, 2022, February 15th, 22, and February 4th, 2022 before us for approval. Are there any comments, changes, or objections to the minutes as presented? Okay, hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. And our second business item this morning is the appointment of an acting inspector general. We have the one item on the agenda to appoint the acting inspector general. The term for the current inspector general, Jeffrey Charrington, expires on April 16, 2022. The board will appoint current deputy inspector general, Renee Fablis, as acting inspector general effective April 17th, 2022. I would like to move approval of the resolution appointing Mr. Fablis as the acting inspector general. Can I get a second from a committee member?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Babers. Ms. Ellison, please call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers?
Aye.
Vice Chair Ports?
Aye.
Ms. Klein?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Since there is no further business to come before the committee, we will stand adjourned and we will move directly to the special board of directors meeting. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg, Chair of the WMATA Board. Thank you for joining us for a special Board of Directors meeting. I'll ask Ms. Ellison, the Board Corporate Secretary, to please call the roll. Ms. Ellison.
Chair Smedberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Babers,
Present.
Vice Chair Ports,
Present.
Director Klein,
Present.
Director Letourneau,
Present.
Director Lowe,
Present.
Director Drummer,
Present.
Director Martin Proctor.
Good morning. Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. First, we have to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, I'd like to move the approval of the agenda as presented. Does anyone have any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Next, we'll move on to our next item, the appointment of an acting Inspector General. Since the inception of the WMATA Office of the Inspector General, the board has fully supported a strong, independent OIG. Over time, the board has had numerous independent reforms, including providing the OIG with its own legal counsel, separate office space, more staff, and increased budget from $5 million in fiscal year 18 to over $10 million for the current fiscal year. WMATA, its customers and stakeholders in the region have greatly benefited from these reforms, which have facilitated better returns on OIG work. Today, the board will be appointing an acting Inspector General to lead this office and critical work. The 5-year term of the current Inspector General, Jeffrey Charrington, ends on April 16, 2022. During this transition period, it is the board's priority to ensure we have named the best individual to lead the Office of Inspector General while maintaining a stable and effective OIG. And again, I'd like to reiterate, the interim IG leading investigations that will continue vigorously without interruption. OIG reforms that are currently underway will continue, as I've highlighted some of them just a few moments ago. And personnel matters do not influence the independence, vigor, or pursuit of the mission of the OIG. So effective April 17th, 2022, Renee Fablis will serve as the acting Inspector General while the board searches for a permanent replacement. Mr. Fablis currently serves as the Deputy Inspector General for Investigations and Special Projects. In this role, Renee leads a team of special agents and investigators overseeing all criminal, civil, and administrative investigations related to Metro's activities and operations. Prior to joining Metro's Office of Inspector General, Renee was appointed in 2012 and 2014, respectively, as the Assistant Inspector General for Investigations and the Deputy Inspector General for Investigations for the Federal Housing Finance Agency Office of the Inspector General. In that capacity, Renee led a team of law enforcement agents who focused on cybercrimes, mortgage fraud, and employee misconduct. The board looks forward to working with Mr. Fablis in this new role and are confident his leadership will provide the OIG with the continuity and effectiveness required to carry out its missions. I would like to move to appoint Mr. Fablis as WMATA's acting Inspector General with the term to begin on April 17th, 2022. May I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Secretary Ports. Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Ellison, please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ports,
Aye.
Ms. Klein,
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau,
Aye.
Dr. Lowe,
Aye.
Mr. Drummer,
Aye.
Ms. Martin Proctor.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. With no further business to come before the board, we will stand adjourned and we will move to the Finance and Capital Committee meeting.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Smedberg. Welcome to the Finance and Capital Committee meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our February 24th meeting before us for approval. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Also hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have one item on our Finance Committee agenda today, but it is the most significant action that we take in the Finance Committee, which is adoption of the fiscal year 2023 budget and capital improvement program. We've had an extensive budget process, and I'd like to thank all the stakeholders who provided their input as part of the budget process. We heard from riders, we heard from jurisdictional partners, elected officials, and many throughout the region. Your comments help shape staff's recommendations and will inform our discussion today. I'd also like to thank our federal partners, and in particular, our congressional delegation from the DC region for their continued support and assistance for Metro. The FY23 budget relies on a significant amount of federal funding to maintain service as we emerge from the pandemic, and we're grateful for that support. In between our last meeting and now, we learned of an additional $120 million grant that will help Metro sustain service levels in fiscal 24. It won't completely eliminate our fiscal cliff, as we're calling it, but it will reduce it from about $520 to $400 million. And so that gives us a little bit more breathing room as we continue our discussions past this budget into FY24. Before I turn the floor over to the team for their presentation, I'm going to make two notes about today's meeting. After this presentation, we're going to hear from the chairs of our two advisory committees, the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the Riders Advisory Council, to receive their comments on the budget. And then it is our practice for all members of the board, not just committee members, to be able to vote on adoption of the budget. This item is before us in Finance Committee today, and then it will move to the full board for our approval at our next meeting. But all members of the board are still eligible to vote on the budget today. So now I will turn it over to staff for the presentation.
Good morning, Chairman Letourneau and members of the committee. My name is Dennis Anosike, Chief Financial Officer for Metro. Chairman Letourneau, can you see the slides?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome. Mr. Chairman, my colleagues and I are here to review the public outreach, as well as the public input received on Metro's proposed budget for fiscal year 2023. As part of today's review, staff would discuss related Title VI equity analysis that was conducted on the service and fare components of the proposed budget. And then we will recommend approval of the proposed budget for FY 2023 and FY 2023 and 2028 capital improvement program. As background, the committee has seen over the last 9 fiscal quarters, the pandemic has had significant impact on Metro's operating environment, as well as Metro's financial performance. Specifically, passenger revenues, which historically funded about 40% of Metro's operating budget, coming mostly from Metro rail revenue, is currently at 17%, as ridership and revenue has fallen. And while the system is gradually recovering, both ridership and revenue remain below pre-pandemic levels, forcing Metro to use available federal relief grants to balance the operating budget. Overall, the proposed budget for next fiscal year is about $5 billion, including $2.3 billion for capital investments and $2.2 billion for operations. And last December, the board approved the docket for public comments, and board members chaired public hearings across the jurisdiction, which took place last February. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn the presentation over to Lynn Bowersox to review Metro's public participation activities and results.
Thank you, Dennis. Hopefully you can hear me and help with advancing the slides for me this morning. Okay, so this year in this cycle of our budget outreach was our first ever hybrid public hearings, and this offered our customers options of both the virtual format as well as in-person format to participate in whatever manner people felt the most comfortable at this phase of the pandemic. The hearings included an audio-only option for people to participate by telephone, and all hearings were in ADA accessible locations, near transit locations. All hearings did feature American Sign Language interpreters, and people also had the option of watching the hearings live or on YouTube without participating. The AAC, which you will hear from when staff complete the presentation today, was briefed both in December and January meetings and received regular email correspondence from staff. All in all, we collected 44 public comments, 785 online viewers, 50 audio-only listeners, and our webpage served as the clearinghouse for the FY23 budget information, including a video, and was the primary source for public feedback via surveys, written comments, and so forth. Half of the views, interestingly, on the website were from mobile devices, people using mobile devices, and half were from people who use desktop devices. And as we move to the next slide, you'll see that we targeted outreach very much toward equity populations, including low income and folks with limited English proficiency, as well as minority communities. 1 in 6 people with whom we interacted this year in person were non-English speakers. In addition to being at all metro locations, metro stations and some bus loops, outreach teams were near Potomac Yard and Silver Line 2 station sites to make sure that we could include prospective riders in their communities. This was all included as a part of our Title VI equity analysis and allowed us to go out into the community beyond just our stations and transit centers to locations including childcare centers, shopping centers, and laundromats to reach as many people as we possibly could. Most of the paid advertising this year to reach out to the community was to help ensure connectivity with Title VI populations. Specifically, Transit App, who's been a terrific partner for us, carried over from last year because of the strong Spanish-speaking customer base that they have. We push notifications on phones home screen and banners and on apps home screen to approximately 30,000 users, resulted in more than 2,700 links. And click-through rate on our push notifications from phones to the home screen was about 6% and 10% on banner ads. And those are really pretty good rates for participation through the online paid boosting. Our stakeholder outreach and communications were really focused around about 4,000 stakeholder emails that went out to state and local elected officials, jurisdictional staff, community-based organizations, community partners, places of worship, event venues, business improvement districts, apartments and residences, schools, shopping areas, and social service organizations. I would point out that low-income respondents this year represented 12% of all comments from households with less than $30,000 a year annual income, and 24% from households with income of less than $50,000. Of the comments from active Metro riders, 51% are currently riding Metro Bus, 79% are currently riding Metro Rail. And active is defined for our purposes as meaning that they took at least one trip using Metro in the last 7 days prior to taking the survey. There are a number of things that we got responses back about, but I'd like to cover in the next slide, in this slide. Thank you, Dennis. The highlights of what we took away on fares and service proposals. So on fares, notably, the ratio of customers who preferred add $25 to Smart Trip Card for $5 bonus, known as the add value bonus, preferred that over the 7-day unlimited ride pass offer more than 3 to 1. And among minority and low income residents, the ratio was more than 2 to 1. So it was really very popular. And we believe the reason, based on the comments, is because it works. The add value bonus works like a forever stamp and it does not expire. And so customers can choose when to use it versus passes that are time limited to a week in this instance, or day, the day it starts, 1 week, expiration. And with the pandemic and the return to work and the shifts that are going on, a little less flexibility there in terms of when you can use it versus the bonus pass. For rail service, the 2 weekend proposals generated the higher rating by minority and low income respondents in particular, and bus for all the bus proposals except for proposal 4C, which was the adoption of temporary changes to 18G and 18H Orange Hunt Line. A majority of respondents indicated that the proposed changes would increase their likelihood of riding Metrobus. So overall, for rail and bus service, as well as fare proposals, what the board has taken out to the public were very well received. Importantly, on this slide, I'm sorry, Dennis, if we could go back to the prior slide. And one more, fare changes. You're just a little bit ahead of me. Thank you so much. So on this slide, I'd just like to mention that the survey data tells us that among the top 4 most popular fare changes or promotions, they were really very, very popular. So when you look at stored value, was the highest, as I mentioned. The second most high was $2 weekend fare, 79% favor. Late night $2 Metro Rail fare, 73% favor. And then the free bus transfer to and from rail, 72%. So those are very, very strong positive numbers on the board's fare proposals. Now let me quickly highlight the service proposals on the next slide regarding Metro Rail service changes. And again, these were for extensions of changes that are already in place largely. We had very large majorities of respondents who favored all 5 proposals. The 2 most appealing were the increase to Metro Rail service on Saturdays. That was 84% of respondents indicate this would increase their likelihood of travel on Metro Rail. And then on Sundays, also an increase of likelihood to travel 80% on Sundays. Notably, these 2 proposals were rated even higher by minority and low income respondents than other proposals. In the case of low income residents, there was a second place tie between 4B and proposal number 1, which was make weekday service frequencies permanent. And then on the Metro bus side, you'll see that the 12-minute frequent service network received a very high response, 74%, indicated that this would increase their likelihood of choosing Metro bus when folks need to travel. And this is consistent with some of what we've seen since September changes were made to the frequency of bus network, where that is picking up trips. Service increases to address crowding, 70% favored, and then slightly less, but certainly a large majority, adoption of the temporary changes to the 83 and 86 College Park line at 62%, and 20-minute frequent service networks at 60%. So all in all, I think the board can make decisions on this budget based on customer input that was largely quite supportive of the proposal package that came out for public comment. Thank you. Back to you, Dennis.
Tom will take over from here to discuss the Title VI equity analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Lynn, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tom Webster, Executive Vice President for Strategy, Planning, and Program Management. And Dennis, if you could go to the next slide. So Title VI of the Civil Rights Act applies to all recipients of federal funding. And Metro's Title VI program includes several elements, including the public participation process that Lynn just described, as well as language access, legal notices, Title VI complaints, and then service and fair equity analyses. All of these components or elements are designed to help ensure that transit operators are not denying access to the benefits of public transportation on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And the Federal Transit Administration also requires that transit operators, including Metro, consider income in equity analyses. FTA guides transit agencies to proactively avoid or address disparate impacts, which apply to minority riders, and disproportionate burdens, which apply to low-income riders. The Federal Transit Administration's Title VI circular requires that Metro prepare service and fair equity analyses for all permanent major service changes, fare changes, and changes to access and fair media. And again, the purpose of these analyses is to determine whether the plan changes will have a disparate impact on the basis of race, color, or national origin, or a disproportionate burden on low-income riders. Next slide, please. So following the public hearing and public input processes, staff completed the Title VI analyses for rail service and bus service increases, for fare reductions, and for the closure of the sales office. And staff found no potential disparate impact on minority riders and no potential disproportionate burden on low-income riders. A memorandum that reviews these findings and the methodology is attached to the resolution that's in front of the committee today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dennis for the operating budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Chairman, the next few slides focus on Metro's fiscal year 2023 operating budget. Slide 18 is one the committee saw previously, showing proposed rail, bus, and paratransit service levels for fiscal year 2023, along with projected fare box recovery ratios by mode. The proposed service levels maintain the same service structure that has been in place since September of 2021. This slide shows recommended changes to the current fare structure to support ongoing service efforts to get riders back to the system, and ties to the results that Ms. Barsox described a few minutes ago. As we noted last November, the 7-day unlimited pass discount and the add value bonus are proposed as 6-month initiatives. So there are 3 changes made to the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget that was introduced last November. And these changes were made based on recent information. The first adjustment is a $10 million reduction to previously requested staffing restoration. The second adjustment is the $20 million reduction tied to a recent determination that no additional services are required as a result of Civil Line Phase 2 revenue service. And the final adjustment is a $5 million funding realignment for the Office of Inspector General that switches operating funds for prayer funds to comply with both board and congressional directives. Collectively, These adjustments reduce the proposed FY 2023 operating budget by $35 million, which is shown in the middle column in the table on the left, reducing proposed federal release funds requirement, therefore, from $760 million as originally proposed to $681 million in the recommendation. The total revenue remains at $374, almost $75 million, with no change to operating subsidy. The pie chart on the right shows Metro's operating funding sources, with passenger revenue at 13%, non-passenger revenue at 4%, federal relief funds at 30%, and local jurisdictional subsidy making up the largest portion at 53%. This slide shows the proposed subsidy contributions by jurisdictions based on the base subsidy growth that's capped at 3% and legislative exclusions of $49 million. And on this slide, we provide a history of federal relief funds that have been allocated to Metro and how they've been utilized, including the $680 million proposed for fiscal year 2023. That leaves unused federal relief funds of $186 million, plus any remaining positive budget variances from the current fiscal year. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Webster to discuss the capital program.
Thank you, Dennis. Next slide, please. So the proposed capital improvement program continues Metro's focus on improving system safety, data good repair and reliability through the rehabilitation, replacement, and modernization of the system. It continues to integrate resiliency and sustainability through capital investments, and also continues to advance the acceleration of delivery of projects to address many of Metro's critical longstanding needs, including the state of good repair backlog. Next slide. So the proposed capital program over the 6 years totals about $12.4 billion, and the proposed and recommended FY23 capital budget is $2.3 billion. It includes investments across 6 categories, including the replacement and rehabilitation of rail cars and railcar facilities, rehabilitation and replacement of critical rail systems, including power, train control, and communications, track and bridge and structure rehabilitation programs, improvements to stations and other passenger facilities, replacement of buses, bus facilities, and paratransit vehicles, and the support of operations and business through capital investments. The next slide, Metro's capital budget and 6-year capital program is supported by federal grants, formula discretionary grants, as well as PREA funding, state and local contributions, including contributions made through the capital funding agreement, as well as dedicated funding. And importantly, the program is supported by dedicated funding backed debt. There has been one change to the out years and the financial plan for the 6-year program since the capital program was proposed back in the fall. And that includes the inclusion of PREA funding through the 6-year period as a result of the infrastructure, the IIJA Act, which extends federal PREA funding for the next 8 years. The next slide, and as we look ahead to the next budget year, Metro continues to face significant risks and opportunities, including recovery from the pandemic, capital program implementation and funding uncertainty, as well as emerging needs and service and operations challenges. With that, staff recommends committee and board acceptance of the public hearing staff report, approval of the Title VI equity analysis, and approval of the FY23 operating and capital budgets and the 6-year CIP. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I'm now going to turn it over to our advisory bodies, starting with the AAC. We have Pat Sheehan and Denise Rush with us this morning.
Denise, your microphone is unmuted.
We are going to let Denise start off first. Denise, you ready?
Thank you.
Good morning. I am Denise Rush, the Vice Chair of the AAC Committee. And I would like to talk to you this morning about an extension of buses to go to rural areas in Fairfax and PG County. If you extend the bus routes and make sure that they run 7 days a week, people can move around much better and get to the stations. But cutting them and making them shorter, you used to could go anywhere on the bus routes, but now they don't extend to the weekends. They stop earlier or they don't run at all. And it's very important that the stakeholders are able to move around, and also a pass for Metro Access users. People going to dialysis, going to work every day. If we had a pass to assist the frequent Metro Access users, it would be a great help to us to know that we could get more for our buck. And this pass, you have it for students, you have it for visitors, you have it for everyone but the Metro Access users. So we just want not special treatment, but fair treatment.
Thank you, Denise.
Right.
And if I can chime in for a second. This is Patrick. Thank you. Also, with respect to Metro Access, what we are looking for is fare simplification and a fixed fare, not the variable fares that we see on Metro Access. So we would like to have a fixed fare that we're seeing on the weekends at $4 for the weekends, and then also after 9:30 at night. We would like to propose that there is a pilot. Maybe we put a pilot program in so that we have fixed fares on Metro Access for the fare system, so that it's simple, fair, and equitable. People will understand what the fares are all about. Agreeing along with what Denise just said, we also with the bus, we also agree with the reliability of the bus service, the bus transformation project, that going forward, and moving forward with the plans going forward with that. And also lastly, we'll say that the fair policies that the board has put forward, we do approve of those, because they they're put forward simplicity, equity, fairness, and sustainability. So from the AAC, we thank you for that and look for bus extension, fare simplification on Metro Access, and also the inclusion of moving forward with bus transformation project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the RAC, I think we have Brian Meyer. Welcome, Brian.
Hello. Good morning, Chairman Letourneau and members of the Finance and Capital Committee and the rest of the WMATA Board of Directors. Thank you for having me this morning to discuss the Riders Advisory Council's thoughts about the recommended FY23 budget and the proposed fare and service changes accompanying that budget. First, we wanted to share our appreciation towards the directors and the staff that were instrumental in the public feedback phase that occurred last month, particularly Lynn and her staff. Thank you for doing that. The in-person sessions alongside the survey data have clearly provided WMATA with plenty of data and the directors to ponder over. Our comments are largely designed to help complement those efforts and insights. Secondly, as it pertains to specific fare and service changes, or in some cases, the continuation of 2021 fare improvements. We agree that all the proposals are ones that the RAC can endorse and believe would help achieve several of the goals of the budget, namely ensuring that operations can expand to meet riders' demand, both in terms of more riders entering the system, but also accommodating new trends in ridership habits as it pertains to headways for Metro Rail and Metro Bus. Ensuring that the fares are designed in an easy to understand, competitive, and equitable manner. So just to kind of elaborate off of what Pat just said. And lastly, hopefully, fingers crossed, that it will lead to more riders entering the Metro system. Ultimately, we understand that future budgets will be more challenging to balance, given trends in ridership, largely brought on by the pandemic, but also the availability of federal and jurisdictional subsidies. Nevertheless, we're confident that in so much as these proposals in the FY23 budget are allowable given our operational and capital budgets, we should do them. While a bulk of our discussions on the RAC and the public sphere pertain to operations, we're supportive of the annual capital budget and the proposed CIP. We're excited to see WMATA and our jurisdictional partners invest in the safety, reliability, and availability of our metro system. We're looking forward to seeing how these changes impact ridership and the budget, and we're looking forward to the next budget cycle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you to all the members of the AAC and the RAC for the work that you do to help inform us and keep an eye on things and keep the pulse of the riders. We really do appreciate it. So now it's the time for us to have some discussion about the budget. So we'll turn it over to first members of the committee and then the full board for some discussion before we vote. I guess the one thing that I'll kind of frame a little bit as we discuss is what was not included in the survey results, because it's a different type of input, was the input we received from our funding partners, our jurisdictional partners, largely consistent in terms of the level of service and providing options being available for riders as they return to work. But one major theme was also fiscal responsibility. I know particularly the Virginia input was very much focused on the FY24 fiscal cliff and urging us to take as many steps as we can with the 23 budget that would help preserve some funding as we enter into the 24 process. And so, with that in mind, I do think it's important that we look at the overall expenditures in this budget. We had quite a few proposals out on the table that we looked at. All of them were popular. I do want to inform the committee that when I move the budget, I will be proposing that we remove one of those fare proposals, which is the add value bonus. And the reason for that is simply that it's the most expensive. It's a $7 million hit to us. And that is money that's directly coming out of our federal assistance, which we still have a $400 million gap in 24. So that would be $7 million more dollars that would stay in that budget to allow us to continue providing the basic service that we need to provide. I also want to acknowledge that any of these budget discussions right now are clouded by the 7000 series issue and the lack of frequency on the system, which is something the board is very much acutely aware of, and working very closely with management, who in turn is working with the NTSB and others, and will be continuing to do that to try to improve the level of service as fast as possible. We know that riders are very frustrated by that. And so it can be difficult when we talk about some of these other issues in the budget and some of the improvements we're making to fare policy and to frequency and to routes and things like that. Well, we still have this issue hanging over our heads, but we're very well aware of that, and hopefully coming to a conclusion on that as soon as we can. So let me open it up to other members of the committee for discussion on the budget, if there is any. Use the raise hand feature. Okay, Ms. Babers, I saw first.
Yes, no discussion, but I just want to thank Dennis and Tom and their teams for presenting to us what, quite frankly, is, always difficult, and that is a budget. And appreciate their willingness to listen to us during the past several months as we brought forth various options. And it's always difficult to weigh the varying things, but just wanted to say thank you to them.
Thank you. Ms. Klein?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to thank everybody who participated in the survey and the public hearings and all of that. That feedback was really helpful, and it's great that everyone was engaged in that process with us because there's certainly a lot here, a lot to digest. So I just had a couple of kind of random questions. The first is with regard to the survey. I noticed that we divided folks into active Metro Rail and Metro Bus riders and then lapsed. Did we make an effort to survey Metro Access riders as well? This might be a question for Lynn if she's still available.
I am. So we do reach out to Metro Access riders to ask for participation in the survey, but obviously the voice of the AAC is so powerful. I think that much of it is channeled through Mr. Sheehan, others who speak directly to the board.
Okay, I was kind of interested in the responses on the survey, just in terms of the percentages. This is more of a comment. I'm just trying to think of, how we can increase response rates among particularly folks who are low income, because obviously that 12% number is lower than we know the ridership is among low income people. Do you have thoughts on that, Lynn?
So I guess a couple of things. First of all, just to reassure you, we do weight the survey responses in order to make sure that they are representative of the overall demographics of the population. So that 12% does talk to specifically the level of participation, but at the end of the day, we do gross up basically to weight that. And I think that it has been a struggle for us for many years to get folks to participate. And there's lots of different theories about it among researchers. And some of the theories are that when you have more challenges in your day, just to get from one end of the day to the next, taking a survey seems a luxury for many people. We tend to have better participation when there are cuts on the table than when there are benefits on the table. And just generally the population, but particularly among people who are affected by anything that's adverse. And this year we didn't have that. So we did have a little bit lower response rate than we might otherwise. I hope that's responsive to the question.
Yeah, that is. I think that's helpful, and obviously something to continue thinking about going forward. And I know that you're working on new strategies all the time, and there's so many different ways of doing outreach. So that's helpful. My next question is back to, I think this was Tom's slide about risks in the capital program. There was one category of risks, I think just labeled capital program risks. And I noticed that that zero emission bus programs was listed as a risk in the capital program. I wonder if you could elaborate on why that's considered a risk.
Yeah, there's maybe that's not the best label. I appreciate the question. It's really a risk and an opportunity. There, as the committee and the board have discussed, there's a lot that's going to go into the conversion to zero emission bus and the electric bus program. I think the complexity of the implementation of that, as well as some of the funding uncertainty over the long term, is maybe why I got grouped in with risk, but that's really the concept.
So on that point, can you speak a little bit about what your thoughts are with regard to some of the federal discretionary competitive grant opportunities? There are two open right now, one specifically focused on bus facilities, including zero emission, and then there's also the broader RAISE grant program that's open. How are you approaching those?
Very encouraged by those. I think we will definitely be, Metro will definitely be putting in applications for each of those programs, and feel that our programs, our investment opportunities line up very well with both the Low-No program and the RAISE program, and some of the others that will be coming. So it does present an opportunity both on the vehicle side and the facility and infrastructure side for continuing and potentially accelerating our program.
Great. So that would be fantastic if we could get additional resources through those opportunities. And the last question is, this is more on the operating side of the budget, and it is the last one that I have. Just thinking about this budget in the context of the announcement about the work on the yellow line and the closures that are going to be coming later this year, if we have considered providing a little bit more of this. I know that there's certainly service to a shuttle service to address those stations that are closed, but are there other bus routes that could be enhanced in other parts of Northern Virginia that maybe aren't lined up exactly with the yellow line, but other ways that people might be able to get around that we've considered and that might be able to be addressed through this budget as well?
So, Ms. Klein, we are working extensively with the jurisdictions and the local providers to figure out what robust set of alternatives we can offer, right? So in addition to the Blue Line, there was, when we've had previous work happening, we had a very popular bus route from the Pentagon, for example, and people are already saying, we need that back. So, but we are working through that. And I think as we get a little bit further along, now that we've declared what the schedule is, that we'll be able to say more about that. I'm not sure unless Paul or Joe have something specific to bring forward to you, that it would be timely for your inclusion in the 23 budget vote to call it out as a specific line. But I can assure you that we have in the budget alternative services through the capital program that will be funded, that will be provided to the ridership once the outage starts, and it will be enhanced by what local jurisdictions provide.
Great. No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to kind of make sure that that was contemplated within the budget and it wasn't something that would have to come later as an add-on. Thanks very much. Thank you for indulging me in a series of unrelated questions.
Okay, any other questions, members of the committee or members of the board? Okay, seeing none, then I will move that the Finance Committee approve the public hearing staff report, the Title VI analysis to adopt the FY23 budget and FY23 to 28 CIP as proposed by staff, with the exception of the $5 add value bonus for every $25 in stored value added to a Smart Trip card. All of the other proposed fare changes would be included. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
That's seconded by Ms. Babers. So as I indicated, I'd like to thank everybody who participated in this process. Just to directly address the issues raised by our AAC representatives. Fare simplification is definitely a major goal of the board, not just for access, but for our entire system. That was a discussion that we want to embark on and actually have had some discussion about, but given the fiscal situation and the uncertainty with ridership around the pandemic, we simply need some more data and understanding to know exactly what our ridership patterns are going to be in the long term. It's very difficult to make large changes in a period of flux, and this is truly an unprecedented period for us. But that is something that's absolutely on the table. And also on bus service, the next step from bus transformation is really looking at the route network itself, and that's a project that Metro has on tap for this year, with a lot of input from jurisdictions and others. So that work will happen. In many ways, this budget is more of a placeholder because we've been in this period of flux, and because we have limitations on what we can do fiscally. I think we were able to keep our subsidy requests from our jurisdictional funding partners relatively reasonable this year and not place an undue burden, knowing that localities are facing some issues as well as our other funding partners. There are some really good things here. I don't think it should be lost that the free bus to rail transfer is now permanent. That's something that's been a big deal for a long time and a lot of discussion that we've had, as well as many of the other things. As I mentioned, this motion does remove the add value bonus. Just when in thinking in terms of why folks aren't riding today, as much as obviously everybody would enjoy a break on fare, I think a lot of it is really more about the other issues, whether it's frequency of service, reliability, safety, and then just the general economy and atmosphere right now with a lot of workers having not returned to in-person work. And so we're really focused on some things that we think would help kind of make those transformational, this transformational period a little bit easier. And this one, to me, is not necessarily something that's going to attract a lot of new ridership or get people back in this context. And as I said, it also has a $7 million budget impact for just a 6-month period, which is really significant. So we're going to be able to keep some more of that federal assistance in our back pockets as we need it going into 24. Dennis can correct me, but I believe when we look at the trajectory of this budget from when it was first proposed by the general manager to now, I believe we've now reduced it by, is it 42 million if this motion passes? Is that correct?
That's
okay.
correct.
So I think that's a strong message to our funding partners that we did do our best to take a strong look at this fiscally. And we're not simply just spending. We're looking at service enhancements, but also trying to be fiscally responsible given the situation that we're in. And so with that, are there other comments on the budget? Ms. Haddon-Lowe, Dr. Lowe.
Tracy is
Sorry.
fine. Look, Matt, I think everything that you said is very well said, and I simply want to chime in with my agreement and to reinforce, the big picture as you framed it. I think that the one missing piece for us as we look to FY24 and beyond is that we also need to demonstrate to our funding partners that we're doing absolutely everything we can in terms of non-fare revenue. And not counting on subsidy as the only source of that. And so, that's something I know we'll pick up in future conversations, but I think that, we have tightened up FY23 in a good way, in a way that I think is realistic and in a way that I think, cues up well the conversations we need to be having about 24.
Other comments? Okay, and thank you, Tracy, for your focus on that issue, which I agree with you is a helpful focus for the board. Okay, I will call on the board corporate secretary for the vote.
Thank you. Chair Letourneau,
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers,
Aye.
Secretary Ports,
Aye.
Ms. Klein,
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg,
Aye.
Dr. Lowe,
Aye.
Mr. Drummer,
Aye.
and Ms. Martin Proctor.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellison. So with no further business to come before the committee, and I'll just note that on March 24th, we will take up the budget once again at our next board meeting, and that will be final adoption. But with no further business, we are adjourned. I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Drummer for our Safety and Operations Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Operations Committee. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections by members of the committee? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to approval of our minutes from our February 24th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. So we have two information updates before the committee this morning. First, Mr. Andy Off and Mr. Joe Leader will provide updates on the status of our Silverline Phase 2 project. And this includes activities leading to operational readiness and also progress on related hiring actions. Second, Ms. Impostado will discuss developments in the implementation of Metro's Safety Management System, or SMS, with a focus on safety assurance. And at this time, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Off.
Good morning, Chair Drummer and members of the committee. Andy Off, Executive Vice President of Capital Delivery. And as the chair noted, also be joined by Mr. Joe Leader, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, to provide our monthly update on the Silverline Phase 2 project. The purpose and agenda today, we'll walk through the status of operational readiness activities, and then Joe will focus on those activities that we'll be carrying out between operational readiness and acceptance or passenger service. And then Joe will also provide his update on hiring. In terms of the metrics that we've been tracking along this journey between substantial completion and operational readiness, for punch list, package A, 73% completed. This data is about a week old. As of yesterday, we're closer to 80%, so we continue to make good progress there. On package B, continue to remain at about 95% completed, and that number has been stagnant due to majority of the items needed to close out that punch list are awaiting delivery. We now updated numbers as of today, 48% awaiting verification. Operational readiness testing for package A as of today, we are at 88% complete, so making good progress there too. Package B, we remain at 78% complete. As we've discussed in previous meetings, Joe and I are working collaboratively with our partners at the Airports Authority to ensure we get as much of the punch list completed before operational readiness is declared. As once operational readiness is declared, Metro's RWP, roadway worker protection rules, will go into effect, which will make the process, it will just take longer and interfere with Joe's ability to complete his work. I did want to note that there are 9 tests that the Airports Authority proposed to move after operational readiness, and we've agreed to that. An example of some of those include our emergency drills and our thermal imaging, which is a test where we take our equipment and run the tracks to identify hotspots along the right of way. But given that we have not accepted the project, we still have the ability to have anything corrected prior to acceptance. I did want to provide some context on our current path to ORD. About 2 weeks ago, we provided a discrete list to our partners at the Airports Authority on things that must be completed prior to the general manager declaring operational readiness. And we did this because, you know, they have the most control on completing these activities, and we're looking for their feedback on when they believe those activities will be complete. Some examples of those activities, of course, the safety certification for package A and package B, which is, you know, well underway. Certificates of occupancy, which we absolutely need in order to start placing our employees into these facilities. ATC, automatic train control, documentation that's required as part of the safety certification process that we are awaiting on the Dulles Yard. And then there are a few select punch list items that we need to get corrected that are certainly not safety critical, but they are needed for Joe's team in order to operate the facilities as intended. Just to frame in terms of the cooperative agreement where we're at, the top left diamond, the blue diamond, substantial completion, that is what the Airports Authority declared back in the fall. At that point, we entered the period of operational readiness testing. The next major milestone will be when the general manager declares operational readiness. There is no defined time period between substantial completion or operational readiness, or the period known as operational readiness testing. It's all condition-based, and as we noted on the previous slide, safety certification, certificates of occupancy are all critical path items that must be completed before we're in a position to declare operational readiness. And next, I will be followed by Joe, who will talk through some of the key activities his team will be focused on.
All right,
Joe.
Andy, thank you. Appreciate it. Below are just some of the activities that will take place once ORD is declared. This period between ORD and when we actually start to run service is approximately 90 days long, and it's an important period where contractors can complete punch list work. Metro and local first responders can train and familiarize themselves with the station proper, as well as the right-of-way. Once ORD is declared, Metro is responsible for securing all facilities, as well as overseeing track access, and we will control track access through standing up Mobile Command. Mobile Command was used during the opening of Silver Line Phase 1, and as well as our long shutdowns we have performed over the last few years. Currently, Metro is merging both work schedules from MWA's contractors, as well as the various departments inside Metro who need to begin PMIs, as well as familiarizing themselves with these new assets. As work carries on, Metro will be working with the WMSC to obtain final safety certification, and will also be ensuring both parties, MWA and Metro, fully satisfy conditions of acceptance found in the cooperative agreement before revenue service commences. Finally, we will be coming to the board at one point and recommend project acceptance. Could I have the next slide, Andy? Thank you. Hiring continues on the Silver Line Phase 2, and at this time, we have onboarded more than 400 new employees who are currently in various stages in their training. We hope to be at 429 new employees hired by the end of March. Next slide. And this is a similar slide that I've shown before. This slide shows the various titles needed to operate Silver Line Phase 2. Orange indicates positions filled already, so you can see we have made great progress onboarding new employees, and that is my report for this month.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Off and Mr. Leader, and we really appreciate the helpful update and certainly the progress made, especially in hiring. If anyone has, I see a number of hands going up. I'll start with Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. So I know that the MSC made some reference to Silver Line Phase 2 in their meeting. I think it was earlier this week, but I didn't get much of a sense from those comments exactly what their timeline is and kind of where they are in the process. I think it's important for the public to understand that that aspect of this inspection process is sort of out of our control, and it's in their control. And so there's obviously increasing interest in having this up and running. But do you have any sense for exactly where that stands with the MSC?
Teresa, you want to take that? Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Go ahead.
Yes, please. So we've been working very closely with MWA and the WMSC to monitor each phase of the safety certification process. It's an iterative process. The process that we've outlined with the WMSC will include, once we receive reports from MWA that finalize the physical conditions, all of the infrastructure, we'll submit an interim report to the WMSC, not less than 7 days before the declaration of operational readiness date. That's really the first phase gate that we pass through with the WMSC. Then, as Metro does all of our operational readiness preparations, our pre-revenue activities and testing, we'll continue to communicate on an ongoing basis with the WMSC. Once we've completed all of that, we will submit an updated safety certification verification to the WMSC for their review and concurrence prior to declaring readiness for passenger service. All of that is dependent upon the content of those reports and any issues that are identified. There are no hard, fast timelines currently laid out within the cooperative agreement relative to the safety certification process. We're meeting on average weekly with MWA and the WMSC to make sure that any concerns or issues that are identified are dealt with rapidly. So we are hopeful that upon submittal of the interim report at ORD and the final report, that we'll have a rapid turnaround from the WMSC.
So I think I'm hearing is, as a result of this process, there shouldn't be surprises from the MSC that come kind of at the last minute, because it's been iterative, step by step through this, and we've been all discussing it. So we think we'll know what the MSC is going, what their input is prior to sort of the end point there.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Mr. Smedberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Matt asked my first question. So my second question is, and Joe or Andy, I'm not sure which one of you wants to tackle this, but just a point of information. When the manager makes a recommendation about substantial completion, or moving it forward to that next stage, does that include the yard? Are the yard and the rail, the tracks, is that all included in one package, or would they be considered separately?
Sir, our stance has consistently been that when the general manager declares operational readiness, it will be for both the yard and the rail, primarily due to the logic that we need both in order to, run the intended service. So we consider the one operational readiness date to include both the yard and the main line.
Okay, because Andy, as I understand it, I mean, the yard is central not only to the operation of that next schedule, but also managing other things throughout the system. Because
yes, sir, absolutely.
It's going to be ongoing, and what have you, that you and Joe and Teresa are working on. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. I see no further hands, so we'll turn the floor over to Ms. Impastato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This presentation will review Metro's progress of implementing our safety management system, as denoted in our agency safety plan. As part of our planned updates to the board, we are concentrating on each pillar of the safety management system, reviewing our achievements and laying out the upcoming activities to support continuous improvement. Last month, we reviewed Metro's progress implementing activities to support safety risk management, which includes our process for identifying and mitigating risk. This month, we will focus on safety assurance initiatives, which seek to ensure that mitigations put in place to manage safety risk are carried out and working as intended, that potential safety issues are identified early, and that safety objectives are met through the collection, analysis, and assessment of information. WMATA has restructured its safety department to reflect our safety management system structure, including developing an Office of Safety Assurance. The office is structured in a triad formation to support three main safety assurance functions: safety investigations, which is tasked with identifying root causes and mitigations to safety events; safety data analytics, which is tasked with performing risk-based safety data analysis to identify trends, areas of greatest safety risk, and provide the basis for upcoming mitigations; and operational safety oversight, the office which is tasked to evaluate mitigation effectiveness in our operations. This presentation will focus on our efforts with regard to operations safety oversight, with future reviews focusing on the other two functions of the triad. When WMATA evaluated a potential restructuring process for the safety department, we identified an opportunity to strengthen and provide enhanced oversight of field operations. The safety department integrated what were standalone facility, bus, and rail safety teams into one unified group to streamline field response, provide consistency with process, and overall to assure parity in risk management, safety committee, and employee concern response management. This new process allows the team's strengths to be shared across all modes and permits consistent use of oversight data that lends to improve trending and analysis. To capitalize on the gains from the organizational realignment, the operational safety oversight team's calendar year 2022 priorities align with the agency safety plan's roadmap for safety assurance. These priorities include voluntary safety reporting, including Metro Safety Hotline and close call reporting programs, safety committees, of which there are nearly 50, and improving roadway worker protection using a data-driven approach. An SMS requires Metro to self-assess our operations and the decisions we make concerning those operations. Employee safety reporting is an integral part of our self-examination, as employees are aware of safety issues and risks that are present throughout the system. At Metro, employees have two primary ways to report safety concerns: the confidential close call reporting system and our safety hotline. In both cases, the employee may elect to seek anonymity or confidentiality, and all reports are analyzed, documented, and addressed. Both programs have data management systems which allow for trending and analysis. And finally, if the reporting employee provides their contact information, our safety department briefs them on the outcome of their report. The safety hotline offers employees a telephonic number and an online option to report safety concerns. And the confidential close call program offers employees an option to report a close call to a third-party data broker. We'll review the structure of these two programs and significant improvements we're making in greater detail in our May presentation to the board. With regard to performance, the safety department has addressed over 500 employee safety reports in the past 2 fiscal years. Topics range from facility conditions to rule interpretation. The spike seen in the lower right-hand graph aligns with an increase in COVID-19 related concerns. Safety assurance staff have focused on building improved processes and strengthening relationships with maintenance and engineering departments. This resulted in reducing the average time to resolve concerns to 3 days, down from what was an average of over 20 in 2019. Moving forward, the safety department will be looking to promote the use of our employee reporting programs by highlighting some high-profile success stories and recognizing employees that have used the system, allowing them to offer feedback on their experiences. An additional feedback loop available for safety assurance activities are Metro safety committees. These committees are typically arranged by location and are comprised of frontline personnel, management, labor representation, and are supported by operations safety oversight personnel. There are nearly 50 safety committees at Metro that meet monthly, with discussion points including recent safety events, metrics, and safety concerns reported to the committee by frontline personnel. Issues that cannot be resolved are elevated to the departmental or executive safety committees for management support. The activity range varies by committee, and the safety department is looking to recalibrate the safety committees by standardizing how incidents are reviewed with a focus on root cause versus rough counts, and how action items are tracked to closure. The management level committees are also expected to review the action item logs for issues where their involvement could expedite solutions. Operations safety oversight personnel serve to horizontally integrate the efforts of the committees and to assure escalation of identified issues that are unable to be addressed at the committee level. Moving forward, safety committees will serve as the drumbeat of Metro's SMS implementation by not only disseminating safety information and metrics, but also by gathering feedback on how implementation is received in our operation and how it could be improved. We'll review in greater detail the efforts with regard to safety committees in future updates on safety risk management implementation. A recent spike in roadway worker protection incidents triggered an increase in activity of operations safety oversight staff. Beginning in July of 2021, Operations Safety Oversight staff developed an improved electronic roadway worker protection compliance criteria that was an amalgam of multiple prior checklists. The Operations Safety Oversight team converted this criteria into a checklist that could be used by all operational management and safety department personnel. Inspection findings were provided to operational management on a daily basis, and mitigations to common findings were formulated via the Safety Operations Working Group. a cross-functional and interdisciplinary team established with the safety department and the operations team. The result of this partnership were targeted communications efforts with regard to common misinterpretations of roadway worker protection rules, as well as a company-wide stand-down that served as a refresher for work zone setups, along with root cause review of recent incident trends. Coupled with an increase in supervisory oversight when wayside personnel request foul time through high-risk areas on the track, these efforts supported an overall decrease in RWP incidents. Metro's operational safety oversight and operational management continue to collaborate and conduct on-site inspections and offer RWP compliance assistance to work crews to ensure that processes are followed and personnel have a resource in the field to directly offer safety assistance. This supports Metro's overall efforts to enhance and improve roadway worker protection, as outlined in prior briefings. Over the next 10 months, WMATA will be completing the recruiting efforts required to grow the team in operational safety oversight to properly support the full implementation of the SMS. The processes surrounding how oversight is conducted will also be improved, with each activity providing a clear scope and objective, metrics to gauge effectiveness, and compliance assistance materials for operational personnel. Finally, there will continue to be an acceleration in the shift in safety data analytics from evaluating incident-based lagging indicators toward leading indicators provided by frontline personnel, whether that be through the evaluation of our safety reporting programs discussed earlier, or through safety observation systems populated by employees. The safety risks identified through this analysis will then be cycled through Metro's safety risk management process for evaluation and mitigation, effectively closing the feedback loop. This concludes our update presentation on safety assurance and the activities of the Operational Safety Oversight Team. I'm now happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. We appreciate the progress made in this program as well. Changing the culture is quite complex, and I'll start with a question before receiving the input from other board members. You mentioned the feedback loop from the front line all the way to senior leadership. And in the time that we've taken actions in implementing SMS, can you share with us any examples of feedback that has been received where we took some action associated with that feedback from the front line?
Absolutely. So the most recent exemplar that comes to mind sounds relatively simplistic, but it's quite powerful. In discussions with our labor organizations and frontline personnel, it was brought to our attention that in the District of Columbia, there was a tree located directly adjacent to one of our bus stops that had grown in a manner in which it directly impeded the ability of a bus to safely berth and service the bus stop. Metro had a number of incidents where bus mirrors, side mirrors, were damaged, and employees had reported the presence of this tree to their safety committees pre-implementation of SMS. And to their dismay, there wasn't effective mitigation action taken. Post the beginning of our implementation of SMS, and as a direct result of some of the process improvements we've made to better track and escalate items, we were able to work with the district to have that tree removed in an expeditious fashion and eliminate the possibility for future bus issues, which enhance the safety not only of our operation, but of our customers as they board the bus.
Thank you. And as a follow-on, 50 committees is pretty extraordinary. That's a lot of information flowing. And I just want to commend the team for making that a reality. The next question I have, well, I tell you what, I'll hold that question and go to Ms. Lowe.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a fantastic presentation, and I want to second the chair's praise of the staff. I particularly like, this seems just really responsive to my own independent read of some of the analyses and some of the issues that have been flagged by WMSC. So, and obviously we need to respond to that. So I really appreciate that, and I like to see it. But, you know, in your presentation, I think the key for me that really stands out is this transition in terms of metrics that we're looking at, that you were talking about. Like, instead of waiting for incidents to happen and then looking at the metric regarding like the number of incidents, like connecting with maintenance and looking for the issues that are going to cause incidents before they happen, right? This is extremely key, and brings immediately to mind for me what happened with the 7000 series. So I appreciate in the presentation that you walk through this roadway worker protection issue, just because this has come up so much with the WMSC, and to show how this is changing, how we're handling roadway worker protection. And, not to demand a whole nother presentation right now, but could you, do you think that, switching to this change in metrics, do you think this could potentially have flagged the 7000 series issue?
So I definitely think if we were to be performing predictive analytics based upon the data that we have, we probably could have avoided a number of issues at Metro. I can't speak specifically to the analytics that weren't performed regarding the 7K, as that's still part of the investigation. But I do think overall, shifting towards establishing metrics that are surrogate measures that serve as precursor data flags will help us anticipate where potential for our next incident is, and intervene and reduce the likelihood or severity of any type of incident occurring.
Okay, understood. And yes, I fully respect the integrity of the ongoing NTSB investigation.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Mr. Smedberg? Sir, you're muted.
Thank you, Teresa, for this presentation. But along the lines of Tracy's questioning, the one thing I don't see here, and one of the concerns I know I had and the board had, is how things were going up the chain. Okay. Senior management is a broad, term. My concern is I want to make sure it's getting to the GM, that it's getting to the board, that it's getting to, Joe and Andy and you. What specifically are you doing, or what is the team doing to make sure that that happens? And
Absolutely.
How regularly is that going to happen? Is it going to be every other week, every month, every quarter? What is that going to be? Because I think this is key here, and it's going to be key for us moving forward. So could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think that is one thing that sort of popped out, I think, with some of the 7000 series issues.
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. And we acknowledge that there has been a gap in escalation processes, as well as in same level integration and horizontal integration between departments engaged and involved in activities that require interdisciplinary efforts. So to address that, part of our safety risk management paradigm, as we demonstrated last month with the dashboarding, is to increase the transparency around data that is collected and acquired and analyzed. We now have dashboards built, not only for various safety committees, but we also have roll-up dashboards. We demonstrated the beta testing of a roll-up dashboard that's available, that summarizes all issues or concerns based upon risk, both probability and severity and direct impact to our operations. Those roll-up dashboards are going live in the coming month. And they'll be able to be both looked at, and information can be extracted ad hoc by Metro's senior management team. But we will also compile reports on a monthly basis on those roll-up dashboards and push those reports to Metro's senior management team. The Executive Safety Committee at Metro meets monthly and will start reviewing those reports. So we will have dedicated time in the agenda to review concerns or issues that have been brought to the attention of other safety committees, as well as lower, middle, and senior level management. The Executive Safety Committee is comprised by membership of Metro's executive leadership team, including the general manager.
Okay. So and do you envision, you know, all those databases and reports are all great and wonderful, but how ultimately, and you don't have to answer this now, but do you see a point where we would have a page or two that would summarize some of these issues that, say, for people like myself or others, that, you know, we could, you know, easily interpret or just see how things are going? Because again, I think this is something that, you know, we clearly want to be more informed on, and you know, as this committee in particular, but the board in general, you know, looks at this kind of work.
Absolutely. So one of the key cultural milestones that we've laid out is increasing transparency and the level of information available throughout Metro at all levels. And that I'll be talking next month actually about some of the efforts that we have underway to do that, including the efforts that we have with these dashboards. We recognize that having the full information available for you to sort through is great, but is probably not realistic in terms of individuals going through and sorting ad hoc themselves. We'll continue to offer that functionality, but we're also going to create summary reports that will highlight things that hit appropriate criteria. Right now, we're establishing that criteria in an interdisciplinary fashion and subject to the review and approval of the Executive Safety Committee.
Okay. Is it fair to assume that you are coordinating the efforts of this Executive Safety Committee? Are you responsible for the management of this committee?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. And would then you be responsible, let's say, I know you said the GM currently would sit on, you know, this committee, or does sit on this committee, but if something came up and the GM was doing other activities, if something came up in committee, would you be the person to be responsible to report this to the general manager?
Yes.
If he or she are absent? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. Ms. Babers?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Teresa. I simply love this safety management system. So every time you talk about a portion of it, you know, I just really, I'm very grateful that we have the opportunity to hear how it's being implemented. So when I looked at slide 3 of the presentation, I was a bit concerned that we're referencing, we're under priorities, we're seeing a voluntary safety reporting structure. And we're seeing that this allows for the hotline and the close call safety reporting. And the use of the word voluntary is I think what is really kind of getting me and make me squirm a little bit in my seat. Because when I think back to the 7000 series, as both Paul and Tracy have mentioned, the question becomes that if this was in place at that time, would it have allowed us to catch anything earlier by saying that we have a voluntary safety reporting system, which means that, you know, when they found, you know, earlier, I think 2017, the what seemed like random issues, if it was a voluntary safety reporting system, I question whether or not they would have thought that they should have used the hotline or the close call safety reporting. So can you expand upon how setting it up as voluntary will get us to where we need to be?
Absolutely. So within Metro's current operational requirements, within our current safety paradigm, we empower employees and obligate employees to raise safety concerns proactively through their chain of command. The differentiator and the reason for the use of voluntary around safety reporting is to offer avenues for employees to raise concerns that, but for their raising the concern through the program, Metro's management would not have had any other purview or insight into those incidents, close calls, or conditions until such time as a more serious mishap risk had occurred. So the premise of voluntary safety reporting is oversight functions and Metro's ongoing supervision, follow-up, and diligence will give us access to a significant amount of safety concerns and issues that we track through our systems of record. Voluntary reporting systems were really pioneered in the aviation industry, and they represented an avenue for employees and stakeholders to raise concerns or issues that may not have met that threshold criteria or would otherwise not have entered your safety risk management process. So it really expands the availability of data by offering employees a way to raise concerns that may not fit under the general requirements of Metro's existing see something, say something sort of safety risk paradigm.
Right. So it's what I'm hearing then, I think, is that it's not so much that the employees may want to be anonymous, but it is that there were no rules or regulations that said when you see this, this doesn't rise to the threshold of a mandatory reporting requirement. So we still want that feedback. So we want you to report it regardless. And I guess in my world, the word wouldn't be voluntary, but I do understand you saying that it is a standard terminology that is used in aviation, that was used in aviation. So, okay, all right, that's fine, I guess. So thank you for that clarity.
Thank you, Ms. Babers. Secretary Ports.
Yes, well, thank you very much. First of all, Teresa, I just want to say I'm impressed with a lot of what you're putting forward right now. And having been in both the aviation and utility industries, which are highly regulated and safety oriented, this is an extremely important topic to me. As a matter of fact, even as Deputy Secretary, I headed up the Executive Safety Committee here at MDOT. And you know, one of the things that I found, and I kind of it's going to go back to Mr. Drummer's comments and others on how it gets back up to the executive directors, and is that I think what I found is that many of the employees would report. However, it ends up stopping at the first line supervisor. Okay. Sometimes because of budget, sometimes because they don't want to disclose it. As I always say, messages get stronger on the way down, get weaker on the way up, however you want to term it. But I found that probably one of the most effective things is to require supervisors to pick an employee, and you could do it on a rotating basis, once a week, once every other week, whatever you determine is sufficient. Walk around with those employees and point out both the physical barriers or physical things that are wrong. For example, not chaining up, cylinders, or, pipes laying on the ground, or whatever, the oil rags not being put into the red oil containers, all these types of things that seem like little things but can turn into big things. And as you identify these, of course, along with the physical problems, there's behavioral problems with that, right? And so from those inspections, if you will, then it gets ramped up into the various committees that they discuss it, and then we take action on it. But I personally do safety audits as deputy secretary. And one of the things that my members on the executive safety committee asked me says, well, now that you're not deputy secretary anymore, where's this going to go? And I said, well, now you're going to have the secretary doing the safety audits. Okay. And which obviously they were happily surprised, but there is no substitute, quite frankly, in my mind, that the top person in the organization should go around and do safety audits. And when I say do these safety audits, it is not a gotcha. It is not retribution. It is simply showing that you care, showing how important safety is to everyone in that organization. I will say that when they know I'm coming, everything gets cleaned up pretty well. I will admit, but that's a good thing too, right? That's also a good thing. But there's still an awful lot of stuff that I personally find from having been involved in, like I said, the aviation and utility industries. I mean, I know what to look for. So I just want to understand, are we going to have a program where we kind of mandate our first line supervisors to walk around with employees, looking at those physical and behavioral things, and then running it up the chain? I think that's very, very key.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have an existing requirement for supervisory oversight. Our supervisors are out, they're engaged throughout operations, directly interacting with frontline staff. The safety department is now working with operations to expand that effort and offer some data-driven guidance as well, and offer some better opportunities for us to record those findings so that we can more transparently follow up. I could not agree more that one of the cultural keystones or cornerstones is having engaged and involved management. Seeing management out of the office in the operation is irreplaceable in terms of showing employees the level of commitment that management is making with regard to implementing safety improvements. We're also structuring our safety committees so that they can receive information from those supervisory observations and can look at them and be a force multiplier, go out into other locations, look for similar concerns or issues. And the safety department serving as the custodian of that data, as well as once we analyze it, informing everyone of potential areas to look for, trends and opportunities and guidance around interventionary efforts.
Could I just so again, when I go out on these safety audits, I've seen some crazy things. I'll be honest with you. Electric cords going through a door that's a metal door shuts. I mean, it just unbelievable things. Gas, being put in the tanks that are right next to the mechanical room. You know what fumes do, right? And so, and simple things, like I said, oil rag containers, not even existing. They're using cardboard boxes to put spoiled rags in, for example. And again, what I see is that the employees would bring it up to first line supervision. First line supervision would not take action. And then when I'm there, I say to the supervisor, you need to order the containers. Unacceptable. You got to do it. Seeing tables leaning, not supported. You need to fix it. And so I think when the employees hear someone in upper management tell first line supervisors that they need to get it fixed, that's one helpful thing. But would you mind, we have a very robust safety committee, and with that we have tablets that we utilize, and we walk around, we take a picture of what is wrong and highlight that and put some narrative behind it, and that becomes our follow-up apparatus too. So not only do we put a date on it, a place, what's wrong with it, but then we had the follow-up afterwards. And if you don't have a system like that, I'd be happy to share that with you as a means to move it forward a little quicker, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you very much, sir. We started building that in our prevention and mitigation wing of our fire life safety team, but I would absolutely like to benchmark the best practices that you've used.
I'll have some of our folks reach out. I might even meet with them because this is something that's extremely important to me. But thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Secretary Ports. I don't see any other hands, and I'll close with one final question. You mentioned 500 plus reports received to date in the system. Can you give us the proportional distribution of that feedback, rail versus bus?
So we have had more reports on the bus side than the rail side. It's approximately 2/3 to 1/3. And I think that's reflective of the size of our workforces. We have more bus operators, a wider scope of our operation, more conditions to assess than we do on the rail side. And especially during the COVID-19 era, as we ramped down rail service and maintained all of those essential services, essentially being the backbone of the region, our bus staff, our operators and our maintenance staff were very engaged and involved in reporting concerns and issues to the safety department.
Thank you very much. Secretary Ports, your hand is still up. Did you have a follow-on question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did forget to mention one thing, Teresa, and this is one that we dealt with. You had mentioned the bus mirrors and the problem with the tree, and you know, it's not just trees, it's signs, it's utility poles, it's the fact that the road leans to one side and the buses tilt over, and there's a lot of things that contribute to that. But one of the things that we did is when we had that problem, you know how the buses had the mirrors on the outside of the bus like this? So what we did is we said, well, what's an alternative? And I know you've seen them, the buses that have the mirrors that are up front, but more towards the closer to the bus, not sticking out, not sticking way out here. They're kind of up front and pushed in a little bit. So what we ended up doing was actually not just looking to the safety aspect, but working with procurement on how we could address that issue in even a better way, not just taking down trees or signs, but how we could change the bus procurement to alleviate that problem. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it just doesn't stop at safety or trying to mitigate a problem like that. There are other solutions that you might have to look forward on. Anyway, just a suggestion.
Absolutely. Our risk, that's what I was referring to with regard to feeding our risk management process. So as an exemplar, one of the things that we are now regularly looking at are the design and specifications from an engineering perspective of our equipment. So specifically bus clearance, we're working with bus engineering on looking at that, whether that be an opportunity for revised specifications moving forward, or even potential retrofits of existing fleets. We're at an exciting time in Metro's journey, and we're looking at bringing a lot of new systems, new equipment online, and it's really an opportunity for us to collaborate and engineer out risk. So one of the primary focal points of our safety risk management effort is following that hierarchy of controls. And instead of going out and trying to cut down trees, let's create buses that don't have the clearance issues.
Bingo.
So yeah, absolutely agree.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. And again, thank you, Teresa. With no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Smedberg, who has a request for the board to convene in executive session. Mr. Smedberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors reconvene in executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts, or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions and/or the federal government, and contractual or other matters, including confidential or proprietary concerns, or the investment of public funds where discussion in public would adversely affect the financial interests of WMATA, and F, safety and security matters where premature release would compromise public safety, and G, disposition of WMATA property, or acquisition of real property for WMATA purposes when discussion in public would adversely affect WMATA's negotiating or bargaining position. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Lowe. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, and thank you all for joining us today.